Hi friends, welcome to the next edition of Garden2Table TV. Today we are in Los Alamos, California at Full of Life Flatbread restaurant where chef owner Clark Staub is going to teach us a little bit about baking Levain bread. Of course, he's very well known for his flatbreads, which are always on the menu, but he started out in baking even before he opened up this restaurant, baking traditional breads. So he's going to give us some tips and tricks and tell us about his starter.
So this is a bread, no yeast. It is a natural starter that I created in 1987.
Okay.
From Pinot Noir grapes.
Okay.
And we've kept it going ever since. We call it the mother.
Okay.
And so this is a natural Levain bread. It's about 36 hours rising, cold rise, and then baked in the wood oven over here. We bake these at about 475.
475 for how long? For how long do you bake them?
I bake them for 35 minutes, covered in a Dutch oven, then take the Dutch oven lid off and cook it for about another 10 to 15 minutes.
Tell us about that Pinot Noir starter. So what does that mean, and how does that work?
So if you look at grapes on grapes out in the field, they'll have that sort of musty white coating along them, and that's all natural yeast. And so what I did was take a slurry of just 100% flour and 100% water, and then wrapped the grapes up in cheesecloth, submerged it in that for a couple days, take it out, feed it some more flour and water, and then take the cheesecloth and kind of break it up so you break the skins, release the sugars inside, and it infuses the slurry with the natural yeast, and then you just keep that going. And eventually you take the grapes out, and the yeast that are in the air, the yeast that are in the flour, the yeast that were in the Pinot Noir grapes all sort of create the mother.
And then what are you feeding that
flour and
starter?
water.
How often do you have to feed it?
I'm feeding it when I'm baking, like I did this morning. We're feeding it twice a day for 2 days.
Okay.
If I was baking all the time, we'd just feed it twice a day.
And this is for years and years that you cook that?
Yeah, but you can put it to sleep. You could get it to rest, and it had its dormancy phase. So it's nowhere near the original Pinot Noir grape starter because it's been added to so many times. Okay. And there's so many yeasts in the air. But it is interesting that the bread starter is back now. It went with me, and I started my bread bakery down in Claremont with it, and then we moved to Vermont with it, and we came back here, and Vienna Vineyard is not too far away from here, so it kind of did the full loop.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. And you're keeping it in the refrigerator?
Yes, right now it's unrefrigerated because I might make more bread.
And then what's the quick recipe for those loaves? Now you've got the starters are key.
So the starters are key to make sure it's ripe when you're ready to go. So bread is based almost entirely on hydration. So we're doing 100% hydration starter, which means 1-to-1 water and flour weight, which is kind of a liquidy starter. And then we're running at about 85% hydration in the loaves of bread. So that would be 85% by weight what the flour we're using. And we're using a type 85 organic unbleached whole wheat flour.
And what else are you putting in it?
Salt. That's it.
That's it?
Yeah.
All right.
We made olive loaves last week, but these are just straight up Levain loaves.
Oh, nice. All right. And you're serving those tonight with dinner?
Yep.
Cool.
Serving those on a couple different dishes. We have a beef bone marrow, and we have something else.
And everything here's all locally sourced farms and farm to table, right?
Yes.
And how long have you been here with Flatbread?
We're in our 19th year.
19th year.
Yeah.
All right. Very cool.
So, making a loaf of bread like this, your active time involved, if you have all the ingredients, isn't really that time consuming.
Okay.
So we're mixing. I do all this by hand. You can also use a machine if you want, like a KitchenAid mixer at home. We're baking in small lots. I'm doing 12 loaves at a time. When I used to have my bakery, we would do thousands of loaves a day. But when I'm doing 12, I do it by hand. It's very meditative. It's very sensory because your hands are in the dough. Once you're mixing, then it's a matter of resting and folding. And there's plenty of websites around. There's an amazing book, the Tartine bread book, that came out that sort of revolutionized how how home bakers can bake bread and come out with amazing results. And that's kind of after having a commercial bread bakery for years, and then going on to something else. When that Tartine bread book came out, it really sort of woke me up, and I had my bread starter, as we talked about earlier, I had my bread starter sleeping in the fridge. And the way that Chad Robertson and presented and executed his loaves of bread just made total sense after 4 years of hardcore, 20-hour days baking bread for me. So I can't recommend that book enough. It's a situation where you're mixing the ingredients at first. You're going through what's called an autolyse period, which is mixing the flour and the water, and in my case, the starter, the Levain, the mother that we talked about, letting that rest for a bit, then adding salt, which will add structure and control the fermentation. And then over the course of the next couple hours, basically not kneading the flour as much as folding it into itself and building some gluten strength. So then once your loaf of bread is baked, then you want to let it cool. This loaf is still warm, so it's still baking a little bit inside. And the result, is a very airy, porous bread that's ready to soak up sauces, just be eaten as it is. And believe me, there's been more than enough times when I've cut a loaf open like this and it looks like not this.
It's all air, you mean? Or?
But yeah, very delicious. You'll see, you've got now this was baked in a wood oven, so you've got your caramelization and your crust. And depending on, how long you bake it or what technique you use, this crust might be thinner or thicker, might be lighter, or in some cases darker. When I used to have a commercial bakery, I had a steam-injected oven, so I could get this crust very thick around here, but you want an airy, porous interior. So this would be the crust on the outside, this is the crumb on the inside, and it's really the combination of those two that make a really good loaf of bread.
And is this kind of the ideal inside that you're looking for?
This is, yeah. This is. Sometimes you're going to get much more airy, holy bread, which some people crave. But this will capture, what we're looking for. We're serving it tonight with roasted bone marrow, roasted beef bone marrow. So if it had a bunch more holes in it everywhere, the beef bone marrow is just going to go through it, get your table dirty.
And what grain are you using?
So this is called, we're baking with it's essentially a whole wheat flour, unbleached, organic. So it's called a type 85, which means it's still got 85% of the bran in it. So it's very nutritious and it's very durable. And then this loaf of bread, even though it came out of the wood oven and was very crusty when I pulled it out, it still is crusty, but you can see it's got some movement.
Oh yeah.
And this loaf of bread will stay fresh on the countertop, covered in a towel for a good week.
So you want us covering it in a towel, not plastic?
Correct. You never want plastic.
I'm hearing about that. No plastic on bread.
No plastic. You can wrap in plastic and freeze it if you want. I tend to cover it just in a dish towel that's dry.
In a dry towel,
and keep it on the counter on a cutting board. This is the same dough we use in our pizza crust, our flatbread pizza crust.
Okay, thank you so much, Clark, for having us here.
Thank you.
Seeing the baking and letting us borrow Jill for all the Meyer lemon.
Absolutely, she's the lemon lady.
She is the lemon lady. She was the sun-kissed lemon lady, is that
correct? She was
correct?
the sun-kissed lemon lady for 17 years. She's not there, so
that's why we thought we had her. Had to have her do the lemon.
She would go off and do the trade shows and do all sorts of lemon recipes.
Interesting. Okay, awesome. Well, can't wait to come back next month and see what's cooking in the kitchen.
Thank you.